As the Starwind drifted deeper into the dark veil, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer alone. The eerie silence that followed the strange surge of energy from the stone hung over the ship like a dark cloud. Yet no one spoke of it directly. There were whispers, quiet conversations in the hallways, but nothing more. Captain Reiner stared out into the dark emptiness of space, her face drawn with worry. The ship's engines hummed beneath her feet, but the usual comfort they brought now felt distant, as if the ship itself was waiting for something. The crew had done their best to go on as normal, but every glance cast at the walls, every shadow that moved in the corner of their eyes, kept the fear alive. It was on the 7th day after touching the stone that the whispers returned. They started soft, like a distant murmur, like the wind howling through a cavern. But they were unmistakable now. They weren't just voices, they were memories ancient and full of sorrow. At first they seemed like random words in a forgotten language, but soon they began to form a pattern, a rhythm. The whispers were calling to the crew. "Captain," Dorian's voice was hoarse, breaking the silence in the control room. "They're getting stronger." The ship's walls were now alive with sound. No one could escape it. It filled every corner, every hallway, vibrating through the floors and ceilings, seeping into their minds. The ship seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. "We need to understand what's happening," Reiner said, her voice tight with determination. She wasn't about to let the ship, her ship, become something else, something controlled by an ancient force they didn't understand. Lara, the navigator, had been researching the alien symbols they had found near the stone. "I think the ship itself is reacting to the stone. This place, the Dark Veil, it's like a graveyard. It's ancient, Captain. I don't know if it's just the ship that's waking up." Captain Reiner turned to face her, the weight of her words settling on her. "What do you mean? You think the ship is alive?" "I think whatever was in that stone, it's more than a relic. It's a beacon." The stone was calling out not just to us but to something older, something far more powerful. And then, as if to prove her point, the ship shuddered violently. The crew grabbed onto whatever they could, barely able to keep their footing as the walls groaned with unnatural force. Dorian's voice, full of fear, cut through the chaos. "Captain, it's coming." The lights flickered, and for a moment, the whole ship seemed to vanish, swallowed by the dark void of space. The stars outside disappeared, replaced by an endless, oppressive blackness. The walls of the Starwind were no longer just walls. They were throbbing with life. The ship was no longer a machine. It was a living, breathing entity. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. In the chaos, something moved, a shadow shifting behind the walls, undulating like a great unknown creature trying to free itself from its prison. The crew could see the faintest outline of something dark and vast, stretching beyond the ship's hull, a presence that made their hearts race in fear. It was then that they realized the truth. They had awoken it. The ship had not only been a vessel for their journey, it had been a prison, a vessel that held something unimaginable, something far beyond their understanding. "Get to the control room," Captain Reiner shouted. But even as they ran, the walls seemed to close in around them, as if the ship itself was turning against them. They reached the control room and Reiner slammed her hand on the emergency controls. The ship's systems blinked and hummed to life, but it was clear that they were no longer in control. The ship was on autopilot, heading deeper into the dark veil, where no one had ever returned. The shadow was moving, pushing against the walls, reaching out. The crew saw the walls pulse and shift, as though they were made of liquid instead of metal. Then, in a flash of overwhelming energy, the presence that had been trapped inside the ship finally made contact with them. A surge of cold swept through the room, freezing the air. It was as if the entire crew had been plunged into the void itself. Time slowed to a crawl as they felt the presence wrap around them. No, it was not just in the ship. It was in their minds, in their thoughts, a force that bent their will, their reality to its own. In that moment, Captain Reiner saw something. A vision, an ancient civilization long lost to time. Massive, twisted shapes of alien beings, their skin shimmering like stars, their eyes empty voids. They were not creatures of flesh and bone, but of pure energy, beings that had once ruled the cosmos, masters of a forgotten empire. The ship had once been their prison, the stone a key to their freedom. And now the crew was the key to their return. Captain Reiner knew that if they didn't act fast, the ship, this prison, would be their tomb. But how could they escape something that was part of the very walls they stood on? In a final desperate attempt, she turned to the crew. "We need to get to the stone. It's the only way to stop this." But as they made their way to the ship's core, the walls seemed to shift, blocking their path. The ship was fighting them. The presence, the thing in the walls, had already begun to reclaim what had been taken from it. And in the silence that followed, the crew realized the truth. They were not the first to awaken the thing in the walls, and they would not be the last. The dark veil was a place of ancient mysteries, where the past had come alive to haunt the future. And as the ship drifted deeper into that unknown, the crew of the Starwind understood one final truth. There would be no escaping the thing in the walls.